because we climbed all the way back in and definitely had our opportunities late. And then a few different miscues, and it's back to a two-possession game, and we couldn't quite get over the hump there. So
Caitlin Clark, a player known for her intensity and brilliance on the court, recently made an announcement that sent ripples through the basketball world after the Indiana Fever's crushing playoff loss to the Phoenix Suns. The Fever, led by Clark, had their hopes high after a promising season, only to see them dashed in a hard-fought series. But it wasn't just the loss that grabbed headlines. It was Clark's post-game reaction that truly turned heads. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Clark, who had carried the Fever on her back throughout the season, didn't just have a stellar year. She became the face of the franchise. From her jaw-dropping deep threes to her ability to command the floor with an aura that made you wonder if she could see plays before they happened, she's been nothing short of mesmerizing. It wasn't long before comparisons to basketball legends started rolling in, with fans wondering just how high she could soar. But after the Suns knocked the Fever out of the playoffs, it wasn't just the defeat that stung. It was the announcement that followed. In the moments after the loss, while most players would be wiping off sweat and perhaps silently replaying the game's final minutes in their heads, Caitlin Clark stood at the center of the locker room, eyes gleaming out with tears, but with a mixture of determination and something more complex. She had a certain fire about her, that much was clear. Standing there, she delivered a speech that would go on to define this moment in her career. No one expected what came next, though. Clark, in her direct and sometimes sardonic manner, announced that she was stepping away from basketball for an indefinite period. This wasn't the kind of announcement that was followed by a deep sigh or a slow unraveling of emotions. No, Clark's delivery was sharp, almost curt, with an edge that suggested she had given this a lot of thought. As she leaned casually against a locker, arms crossed, she explained that she needed a break, not just from the game, but from everything that came with it. The grind, the media spotlight, the constant need to perform at a level most only dream of reaching. It was a declaration that stunned not only her teammates but the entire sports community. For fans, this was a gut punch. Caitlin Clark was not just another player. She had become a symbol of hope, a rising star who seemed capable of rewriting the rules of the game. Her unique style of play, often chaotic yet brilliant, was something the Fever had come to rely on. And here she was, in what seemed to be the prime of her career, stepping away when everyone expected her to push even further. It felt like the ultimate curveball from a player who had made a career out of keeping opponents guessing. What made the announcement even more shocking was the timing. The Fever had been on the verge of something great. While they had fallen short against the Suns, many believed that with a few adjustments and, of course, Clark leading the way, the Fever would be legitimate title contenders next season. Her decision to take a step back threw all of that into uncertainty. Was this a temporary break? Was she going to pull a Michael Jordan and return stronger than ever? Or was this a sign that her love for the game had begun to wane? Throughout her announcement, Clark maintained the calm, unflappable demeanor that fans had grown used to seeing on the court. Even in moments of defeat, she rarely showed frustration, instead opting for a dry wit that made her both endearing and at times exasperating. The locker room atmosphere after her declaration was thick with silence, the kind that follows when no one is quite sure what to say next. Her teammates exchanged glances, clearly taken aback. A few shifted uncomfortably, perhaps hoping someone would break the silence, but no one did. It wasn't until Clark herself cracked a smile and made a remark about how this wasn't a retirement speech that the tension eased, if only slightly. Her decision to step away could be viewed as a response to the immense pressure she's faced over the past few years. Since her rise to fame in college, Clark had been dubbed the future of women's basketball. Every move she made on the court was dissected, praised, or criticized. While she rarely showed signs of the weight she carried, it's impossible to ignore the toll that this level of scrutiny can have on a person, no matter how tough they appear on the surface. Clark had always handled the media with a kind of disinterested charm, often answering questions with quips that hinted at her exhaustion with the relentless spotlight. But behind that cool exterior, the pressure was undoubtedly mounting. It wasn't just the expectations placed on her by fans or the media. It was also what she expected of herself. Clark was never one to settle for mediocrity. In fact, mediocrity seemed like an insult to her very existence. Anything less than exceptional was unacceptable, and perhaps this drive to constantly be the best, to outdo even her own best performances, had finally caught up to her. In the days leading up to the Fever's playoff elimination, there had been signs that something was off. Clark's usual swagger seemed a bit more forced, her shots just a little more hurried. And while she still played at a level that most players could only dream of, those who followed her closely noticed the subtle cracks in her game. There were moments when she seemed adrift, her mind somewhere far away from the court, as if she was already contemplating the decision she would eventually make. For the Fever organization, Clark's announcement brings with it a whole host of questions. What would this mean for the team's future? Clark had been the centerpiece of their rebuilding effort, and without her, the team's trajectory becomes far less certain. She was their star, their leader, the player around whom they had constructed their entire game plan. Without her, the Fever would be forced to rethink everything, from their lineup to their long-term strategy. Losing a player of Clark's caliber, even temporarily, is like losing the engine of a car. You can try to coast for a while, but eventually you'll stall. Yet, in typical Clark fashion, she didn't dwell on the potential fallout of her decision. She kept things light, almost deflecting the seriousness of her announcement with humor. At one point, she joked that maybe she'd take up golf, which drew a few chuckles from her teammates. But behind the jokes was a player who had made up her mind. Caitlin Clark wasn't one to make impulsive decisions. When she stepped away from the game, it wasn't because she was running from something. It was because she needed time to recalibrate, to figure out what was next. The basketball community is no stranger to players taking time off to regroup. Legends have done it before, and many have returned stronger. But what makes Clark's announcement stand out is how sudden it seemed. There were no lengthy interviews hinting at burnout, no cryptic social media posts that foreshadowed a break. She simply decided, in her usual no-nonsense way, that it was time to step back, and in doing so, she left fans, teammates, and analysts alike speculating about what would come next. The implications of her decision extend far beyond just the Fever's roster. Women's basketball as a whole has been riding a wave of momentum in recent years, with players like Clark at the forefront of that movement. She was a part of a new generation of athletes who were pushing the game to new heights, both in terms of skill and visibility. Her decision to step away, even temporarily, could shift the landscape of the sport. How would the league adjust without one of its brightest stars? Would other players feel emboldened to take similar breaks, knowing that even the best need time to recharge? While Clark didn't offer any specific timeline for her return, her announcement was anything but a farewell. She made it clear that she wasn't closing the door on basketball, just taking a moment to step away from it. Whether that moment lasts a few months or longer, only time will tell. In the meantime, fans will be left wondering how this hiatus will shape her future, and the future of the Fever. And yet, in true Caitlin Clark fashion, there was a sense that this was just another move in her unpredictable and often thrilling journey. It's hard to imagine that someone with her talent, drive, and competitive spirit could stay away from the game for too long. But for now, the only certainty is that basketball will feel a little emptier without her on the court. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.